house where time grows. 11-year-old Takashi felt a strange flutter in his chest as the old train rocked them deeper into the forest. He wanted to leap into the adventure ahead, but he also felt a small shiver of nerves down his spine. The windows were misty from the afternoon rain, and the tall pine trees outside danced like silent giants. It was Takashi's first summer at his grandfather's dacha, the old summer house hidden deep in the woods. The idea of spending a whole month there by himself filled him with both excitement and unease. He pressed his nose to the glass and watched fireflies blink in the twilight along the tracks. The train arrived at a tiny overgrown station, and his father took his hand. "Welcome, Takashi, to the Pinewood Dacha," he said with a grin. The boy hopped off the train, and his little sister, Yuki, was already running ahead, eager to explore. Takashi stepped onto the platform and noticed clocks ticking everywhere. A cuckoo clock, a tall grandfather clock, even a small pocket watch lying on a bench that seemed to tick by itself. He shivered with wonder and a little nervous excitement at the sight of so many timepieces. His grandmother stood by the station building, leaning on her cane, but her eyes were bright. "Takashi, darling," she called, pulling him into a warm hug. The air smelled of pine sap and wildflowers, and Oban held a chipped enamel cup of hot tea. "You've grown taller since I last saw you," she said with a wink. Takashi felt proud. He remembered that 2 years earlier, at 9, the forest had seemed endless and magical. Now, at 11, it felt a little smaller, and he suddenly realized how much he had grown. He looked up at the small station house behind Oboasan. It was painted a faded yellow, the paint peeling in places, and ivy crept around the windows. Takashi wondered how many summers it had seen. At the dacha's door stood the old man known as the guardian of time. He was tall and thin, with a beard as white as birch bark, and eyes that glimmered like morning dew on a clock face. His name was Haruki-kan. His fiancée, he wore suspenders and a flat cap. Even though the morning was warm, Takashi's father introduced him. "This is Haruki-kan. He takes care of grandfather's summer house and everything in it." Haruki-an tipped his hat and smiled kindly. "Welcome, Takashi. I see the forest brought you safely again." Inside, the cottage smelled of old wood and homemade jam, of summer sunshine and memories. Clocks filled the cozy room, big ones with pendulums, small ones that chimed on the hour, and clocks of copper and wood, each ticking in a gentle chord. Takashi felt the sound like a heartbeat in the warm afternoon. He wandered over to a wooden shelf and ran his fingers along a carved cuckoo clock. The little bird popped out and sang, startling him into a laugh. Ivan chuckled softly. Kashi's unease melted away. Once Takashi had put down his suitcase by the battered green couch, Haruki-kan offered to show him the rest of the house. As they walked through the rooms, Takashi noticed old photographs on the walls, a young boy and a kindly old man planting a tree together, and in another photo, a little girl holding a teddy bear under the pine sky. Those were grandfather's children, Ivan whispered, almost to himself. Either grew up here with love and adventure. Shelves of dusty books and more clocks lined the hallway, each telling its own silent story of time. That evening, as the sun melted behind the trees, Abaran lit a small oil lamp on the round kitchen table. Takashi's family gathered for supper, his mother stirring a pot of borscht, his father slicing dark rye bread, and his baby sister cooing happily in her high chair. The radio played a gentle folk song in the background. This house has always kept our family together, Ubasan said between bites of pie. It's full of memories if you listen closely. Takashi smiled and took a sip of sweet tea. He glanced out the kitchen window at the garden, where crickets chirped in the night and fireflies blinked among the flowers like tiny stars. He felt so warm and safe with his family around him. After dinner, Takashi tiptoed out onto the wooden porch under the indigo sky. He listened to crickets tinkling and the sigh of the wind through the pines. The old grandfather clock on the porch struck 9, its deep chime rolling softly through the night air. "Don't forget," his mother called from the doorway. "Haruki-kan will tell you the bedtime story tonight." Takashi's eyes lit up. Storytime on the porch was a tradition he always looked forward to. As the last chime faded, he found Haruki-kan waiting for him in a rocking chair on the porch swing. Ivan began his tale in a gentle, soft voice. Once, many summers ago, this very house was built by a young clockmaker named Nikolai. He loved time more than anything, and he placed a clock in every corner of the cottage. But Nikolai was afraid of one thing: losing his childhood. As the years passed, he worried he would forget how to laugh and dream like a boy under the stars. So he whispered a special wish into each clock, that time might grow slowly, like a tall tree growing in the forest. Takashi felt his eyelids grow heavy, but he kept listening, enchanted by the story of the clockmaker who wished time to slow. Finally, Takashi, sleepy-eyed but excited, asked, "Is that why all the clocks here feel alive?" Haruki-kan chuckled. "In a way, yes. These clocks watch over us in their own gentle way. But remember, my boy, time is a wise friend, not a cruel master." Takashi nodded under the twinkling stars. He felt safe, listening to the ticking clocks and Ivan's tale, ready for the wonders of tomorrow. The next morning, Takashi woke to the smell of pine honey and warm cinnamon rolls. He sat up with a start and heard a gentle fluttering sound. A small owl was perched on the windowsill, blinking at him with golden eyes. Takeshi grinned. He remembered that wise old owl from last year. Yesterday, when he and Ivan had walked to the well for water, the owl had hooted softly and guided them like a friend. Now, as if greeting Takashi on his first morning, the owl fluttered around the lamp, and then flew off into the pine trees. Takashi hurried downstairs. Abagan was in the kitchen, placing a basket of fresh apples and jam-filled pastries on the table. "Good morning, dear," she said with a warm smile. "Eat something and then get ready. We've invited our neighbors to visit today." Takashi's eyes widened with excitement. He had met these neighbors before. Mei, a dreamy girl with paint-streaked fingers who talked about clouds and fairies, and her cousin Riku, a brave, boisterous boy with a quick laugh. Outside, the forest was alive with morning light. Sunbeams filtered through the towering birch trees, and dandelion seeds floated like snowflakes in the warm air. From down the path, Mei came running toward the dacha, purple paint on her cheeks from painting wildflowers by the creek. "Hello, Takashi," she called cheerily. "Is this the same mysterious pocket watch I told you about in my dreams?" Takashi laughed, and Mei giggled back. A moment later, Riku popped up on a nearby boulder, looking out like a lookout. "Up here, I can see smoke from the chimney," he shouted, waving. The children set off down a sun-dappled trail together. Mei paused at a glade and pulled out her watercolor paints. "Now I want to paint the spirit of the forest," she said dreamily. "If I mix the right greens and golds, maybe the trees will show me a secret." Takashi watched as Mei dipped her brush and painted a spiral of leaves and stars on a smooth white pebble. In the painted squirrels, he thought he saw the forest shimmer. Nearby, Riku, ever the prankster, picked up a pine cone and dared Takashi to try to sneak up on a squirrel without frightening it. Suddenly, Mia's eyes widened and she pointed to a hollow at the base of an old oak tree. Something shiny lay hidden there. Rika jumped down from the boulder and reached carefully inside. He pulled out a tiny carved wooden box, etched with gears and stars. Kashi's heart thumped. "It looks like a treasure chest for tiny hands," Mei exclaimed. They opened it carefully. Inside, nestled on a velvet cloth, was a small silver key shaped like a clock hand, and a piece of parchment faded with time. Takashi unfolded the parchment and read aloud a strange riddle. "Grow not too slow, nor too fast. Finish at last, keep what's past. The balance that makes time last." Just then, a tinkling chuckle came from behind them. The children turned in surprise. Stepping out from behind a birch tree was an old, gnome-like man in a green jacket. His beard tangled with pine needles and tiny leaves. He had a twinkle in his eye and a mischievous grin. "Ah, children," he said, bowing low. "Or should I say, dear time travelers, you found the key to the festival of time." The children stared. Takashi had heard tales of a forest sprite named Kenta who watched over these woods. "Kenta," he whispered in awe. The gnome laughed softly and pointed to the silver key. "I am Kenta, friend of those who respect time," he said. "Come with me, for the festival of time will begin soon, and you have the key to unlock it." With that, Kenta turned and led them along a winding path that seemed to appear out of nowhere in the moonlight. The trees opened into a wide clearing bathed in pale silver light. Every branch of every tree held a clock, pocket watches dangling like drops of dew, cuckoo clocks peeking out from nests, and bright brass clocks wound around the old trunks. The air was alive with a gentle chorus of ticking and chimes, like hundreds of tiny bells. Fireflies danced overhead, their lights flickering like lanterns in the darkness. It felt as if the whole forest were holding its breath in wonder. "This is the festival of time," Kenta whispered with delight. In the center of the glade stood a massive clock embedded in the earth, its face painted with a golden sun and a pale moon. The clock's hands were frozen at midnight. On its face were painted scenes of children playing and old friends laughing together, flowers blooming and withering. Takashi felt a curious tug at his heart as he looked at it. Kenta handed Takashi the silver key. "The key fits this clock," he said gently. Mei stepped forward eagerly. "Beat the dancing lights," Kenta encouraged. Mei dipped her brush into the air as if it held moonlight and swirled it with a flourish. From her brushstroke sprang a glittering firefly, which settled softly into Takashi's open palm. Riku laughed and reached up to touch the owl that had perched nearby on a tree branch. Everything there felt like a beautiful dream. As twilight deepened, Takashi's eyes kept returning to the giant clock. Something about its still hands pulled at him. Kenta and the others grew quiet. The stars overhead seemed to shine a little brighter. Finally, Kenta leaned close and whispered, "Go ahead, make a wish." Takashi remembered the riddle he had read. "Grow not too slow, nor too fast." His heart raced. His parents had been so proud that he was growing up strong. A part of him felt excited. He was taller now, stronger, but another part felt unsure. He took a deep breath and gently turned the clock's hands forward a little, toward midnight. The moment his fingers touched the brass, everything around him grew heavy and still. The night air held its breath. Suddenly, Takashi felt a strange tingling start in his toes and rush up through his body. He stumbled, and the world began to spin. It felt as if he were falling through a tunnel of stars. He closed his eyes tightly to steady himself. When he opened them again, everything had changed. The clearing sparkled differently now. The painted scenes on the great clock had stopped moving. Takashi looked down at himself. He was not 11 anymore. His shirt sleeves were too short and his legs felt longer. He noticed a rough stubble tickling his chin. Panic surged in him. He was a grown man, at least in looks and height. Mei gasped and grabbed Riku's arm. "That's not our Takashi," she cried. The owl hooted anxiously and flew up into the branches. Even Kenta's eyes grew wide with surprise. Takashi felt tears sting his eyes. "This is all wrong," he whispered. in the deep voice that rumbled from his throat. He looked around the glade and suddenly felt very small in a world that was too big. He thought of his grandmother's cozy kitchen, of running barefoot through the garden, of bedtime stories on the porch. He realized how much he missed being a boy. The owl swooped back down and perched close by, as if understanding. It tilted its head and hooted softly, comforting him. Kenta stepped closer and laid a gentle hand on Takashi's shoulder. "I see you have tasted the future, Takashi," he said quietly. "And now you know something very important. It's not time itself you need to fear, but forgetting who you are as time passes." Takashi's vision blurred with tears. "Please, how do I go back?" he said, his voice trembling, wishing he were a boy again. Kenta nodded and pointed to the clock's face. Its hands now showed 6 o'clock. "To change the time again, think of what you love most and let that guide the hands," he whispered. "Remember the riddle. Keep the balance of youth and age." Takashi closed his eyes. He pictured himself swinging on the old porch swing, the little owl on his shoulder, running in the creek with Mei and Riku, laughing and splashing the cold water. He thought of Ba-chan's kitchen, warm and safe. Slowly, Takashi turned the key toward midnight. The clock's hands clicked slowly into place. Suddenly, the heavy silence broke. The glade seemed to breathe out, and colors brightened as if a new sun had risen. The chorus of ticking swelled into a joyful chime. Takashi felt the strange tingling leave his body, rushing from his head down to his toes. He opened his eyes and looked down. He was 11 again. His clothes fit like before. His knees were strong and small, and his face was smooth with wonder. Mei whooped and ran to hug him. "You did it, Takashi. You changed it back," she exclaimed. Riku beamed at him. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," he said, clapping Takashi on the back. The owl hooted happily and fluttered around them. Kenta laughed and clapped. "Time listens to the heart," he said. "You are home now, young traveler." With a merry wink, Kenta danced back toward the trees. Takashi waved at the spot where Kenta had disappeared, feeling a warmth in his heart and gratitude for the kind forest spirit. Together, Takashi and Mei and Riku made their way back along the winding forest path. The first light of dawn was breaking, spilling gold through the leaves. The festival of time was over, its magic lingering like morning dew. Takashi felt excited and a little proud. He knew now that growing up was part of life's adventure. He realized he had been part of something much larger than himself and felt proud that he had the courage to face time's challenge. When he reached the dacha, he found breakfast already on the table. His mother poured hot cocoa into a cup for him, but Bun sat quietly knitting by the window, and his father lifted a sleepy Yuki from her high chair. Takashi slid into a chair as if nothing had happened, except that everything had changed inside him. She felt a quiet pride inside, still riding the happy glow of last night's adventure. A few moments later, Takashi saw Haruki-kan heading up the attic stairs. He caught up to him quietly and touched his shoulder. "Thank you," Takashi whispered. Yvonne turned and smiled. "What for, Takashi?" he said gently. "For telling me the story and, well, for everything. For teaching me about time," Takashi said softly. Yvonne's eyes twinkled. He gave Takashi a warm pat on the back. "Time is like our forest," he said. "Steady, patient, always growing. You just have to grow with it." Takashi felt comforted by those words. It was as if he understood now that growing up was something to look forward to, not fear. Takashi nodded, understanding. Outside, he heard Mei and Riku riding their bikes down the winding path, calling back goodbye. The birds were singing, and the morning sun was warm on his skin. The forest around him felt friendly and endless. Takashi walked back to his family with a brisk, cheerful step, eager to tell them about everything he had experienced. That afternoon, the last day of summer, was passing quietly. Takashi paused at the door of the dacha one more time. The old grandfather clock on the porch chimed 7 gentle notes. He placed a hand on the smooth wooden door and whispered, "Goodbye, Pinewood Dacha, until next summer." He closed his eyes and silently wished the moment could last forever. In the distance, he thought he heard the soft hoot of the owl from the clearing, or perhaps it was just the wind rustling the pine branches. He took a deep breath of the cool pine-scented air and turned back to his family. Takashi was still 11, but he knew that each new day, each new year, would grow with him just as patiently and beautifully as the forest around him. He smiled, and in that moment, everything felt timelessly right.